In 1938, we had escaped from the horrors of Nazi Germany. My family had to split up and escaped in different routes and different countries, and I traveled to England all by myself, just 11 years old, and not speaking a word of English. Luckily, I was taken to a boarding school and looked after very well. Then we had a family reunion a year later, in 1939. But when we had our school holidays, of course we had to stay somewhere. My family had picked out a hotel in Maida Vale in London, which was a sort of haven for refugees from all different countries, people who had escaped from the Nazis, from Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Austria, Germany, and various other countries. And we found that all the people at the hotel had one thing in common: they spoke very little English, they preferred continental food, and they were communicating in different languages. Staying there with some very, very interesting people, some of which I have a story which I will relate at a later stage, but one particular, which I didn't realize at the time, was Sigmund Freud. We had escaped in May 1938, and 2 or 3 weeks later, Sigmund Freud escaped from Vienna and also arrived in London, and whilst his house was being furnished and got ready for him, he stayed at the Esplanade Hotel. Here's an actual photo of him arriving at the hotel. And of course I met him at the time, but I had no idea who he was. Nor did I realize that later in life I would become interested in psychotherapy and workings of the mind. So it's a great thought that I actually met Sigmund Freud in my early life. Well, I made a few friends at the hotel, in particular one called Sasha and the other one Valentine. The 3 of us, we used to go out and play in the street, even when the Blitz was on. But when aeroplanes were overhead, of course the anti-aircraft guns would fire, and after a few moments, sometimes minutes, shrapnel from the shells would come down, and the shrapnel would be very sharp, jagged, and different sizes, and it would be red hot. And there are many people who collected these pieces of shrapnel, but my friend Valentine was absolutely mad, because we used to shelter in doorways, because when you heard the shells bursting, you knew that minutes later the shrapnel would come down, and many people got killed by these. So he used to jump out from the doorway and collect these red-hot pieces of metal. We all collected them, but not to the extent he did. And we had one incredible escape, and that was the 3 of us went on our bicycles to Edgware Road, which was about 15-20 minutes away from where we were. And we went inside the cinema to see a film, and we hadn't been there long when the usherette came on to us and said, "Are you the boys that left your bicycles outside?" And we said, "Yes." And she said, "Well, there's a policeman out there, you've got to move them, because, as I said before, you weren't allowed to leave bicycles around in case the parachutists, they'd have the mode of transport, and we hadn't locked them up." So we said, "Oh, couldn't we see the end of the film?" "No, you've got to get out now, because the police are waiting for you." We went outside, and they said, "You've got to chain them up, but you can't leave them here." We didn't have chains, so reluctantly we came out of the cinema and started pushing the bicycles, walking down Edge Road back to Maida Vale. When we got down, I can't judge it exactly, but probably half a mile, maybe 3/4 of a mile, we heard a fantastic, incredible explosion, and we felt the blast. We weren't blown over or anything like that, but you could feel the blast. And the next day we heard the cinema had been bombed. And if we hadn't been called out, we would have been in that cinema. I assume that the usherette who called us out and the other people who were there would have been killed. But of course a very lucky escape for us. Mind you, it was happening all over London and the main cities of the United Kingdom, and at that time we could just not imagine that the war would ever stop.